Before Rome ever set foot in the Balkans, the rugged mountains and coastlines of the western Adriatic were home to the Illyrians, a patchwork of tribes whose culture was shaped by both land and sea. Unlike the urban Greeks or the structured Romans, the Illyrians thrived in small tribal units. Each tribe had its own chiefs, warriors, and traditions, and although they sometimes united under a strong ruler, unity rarely lasted. What bound them together most was the Adriatic Sea, their highway of trade, raiding, and warfare. The Illyrians were not strangers to the outside world. They traded amber, metals, and livestock with Greeks and Italians, but their reputation across the Mediterranean was dominated by one thing: piracy. Their fast, maneuverable ships, the lembi, were perfect for sudden strikes. They could descend upon a merchant vessel, seize its cargo, and disappear before help arrived. For Illyrians, this was not mere banditry. It was warfare at sea, a continuation of their culture of raiding. But for their neighbors, especially the Greeks and Romans, it was a threat to commerce and security. By the early 3rd century BC, one tribe stood above the rest: the Adriatic. Under King Agron, they built the largest and most feared Illyrian navy yet. Agron's rule marked a golden age of Illyrian strength. His forces defeated Greek coalitions and extended influence deep into the Balkans. But his reign was cut short around 231 BC, and the crown passed to his widow, Queen Teuta. Strong-willed and unbending, Teuta continued Agron's policies, but where Agron balanced diplomacy with aggression, she embraced the Illyrian seafaring tradition fully. When foreign envoys demanded she rein in her captains, she dismissed them, insisting her people had the right to live by the sword and the sea. Unfortunately for her, she had underestimated Rome. The Republic, fresh from its victory over Carthage in the First Punic War, was emerging as the foremost naval power in the Mediterranean. Its senators, determined to secure trade routes and protect allies, could not ignore Illyrian raids. When Roman merchants were attacked and Italian sailors killed under her watch, Teuta's defiance became the spark. What had once been tolerated as local trouble was now seen as a direct challenge to Roman authority. And so, in 229 BC, Rome crossed the Adriatic for the very first time. The stage was set for a series of wars that would last half a century, reshaping the Balkans forever. When the Roman Senate resolved to act against the Illyrians, it was a decision of enormous significance. For centuries, Rome had focused almost entirely on Italy, and more recently, its deadly struggle with Carthage. Crossing into the Balkans meant stepping onto a new stage, one that would eventually lead them deep into the affairs of Greece and the Hellenistic world. But in 229 BC, Rome's immediate concern was simple: stop the raids and make an example of Queen Teuta. The Romans assembled an army and fleet on a scale the Illyrians had never faced before. 2 consuls led the campaign, supported by thousands of troops and a powerful naval squadron. Their target was not only Teuta's stronghold, but also the web of allies and pirate bases she commanded along the Adriatic. When the Roman fleet landed, it marked the first time Roman legions had ever set foot in the Balkans, a turning point in Mediterranean history. Teuta, despite her determination, soon discovered that Rome's war machine was unlike any other. The Illyrian lembi were fast and agile, but against Roman discipline and heavy naval power, they were no match in open battle. Coastal towns that had once relied on Illyrian protection quickly shifted allegiance when Roman forces arrived, preferring the security of Rome's vast resources over Teuta's uncertain rule. Even Corcyra, a key island stronghold, fell into Roman hands, stripping the Illyrians of one of their most important bases. Facing defeat, Queen Teuta retreated inland. The campaign was swift but devastating, and in 228 BC, she was forced to surrender. The terms Rome imposed were harsh. Teuta was stripped of most of her authority, confined to a small part of her territory, and forbidden from sailing south of the port of Lissus with more than a handful of unarmed ships. The proud Illyrian seafaring tradition had been shackled. Rome also established protectorates along the Adriatic coast, ensuring that key cities and trade routes would remain under its watchful eye. For the Illyrians, it was a crushing humiliation. For Rome, it was a triumph far greater than securing trade. With a single war, they had shown the Greek world that they could project power across the sea, defeat a major regional kingdom, and impose order where none had existed before. The Adriatic was no longer Illyrian waters. It was now, unmistakably, Rome's domain. Yet the Illyrian spirit was not broken. The defeat of Teuta would not be the end. Other rulers would rise, determined to defy Rome, and the Adriatic would once again witness the clash of Lembi and Roman warships. The fall of Queen Teuta left Illyria weakened, but not entirely subdued. Rome, satisfied with its new foothold, withdrew much of its presence, leaving local allies to maintain order. Into this fragile balance stepped a new figure, Demetrius of Pharos. Originally a Greek adventurer who had supported Rome during the war with Teuta, he was rewarded with power over part of Illyria. At first, he seemed a loyal client, but beneath the surface, he was far more ambitious. For nearly a decade, Demetrius rebuilt Illyrian strength. He restored fleets, fortified positions, and slowly gathered influence among the tribes. Rome, distracted by conflicts in the west and south, was content to look the other way, until Demetrius openly broke the terms imposed after Teuta's defeat. By 220 BC, Illyrian ships once again sailed beyond the limits Rome had set, raiding Greek coasts and threatening vital trade routes. For the Romans, it was a clear provocation. The Senate could not ignore this defiance. In 219 BC, the consul Lucius Aemilius Paulus was dispatched with fresh legions and a fleet to bring Illyria to heel. The campaign was decisive and swift. Roman forces stormed Illyrian strongholds, seized coastal towns, and captured key islands. Demetrius, unable to rally his forces against the disciplined Roman advance, abandoned his kingdom and fled across the sea to the court of Philip V of Macedon. His flight was telling. Instead of standing with his people, Demetrius chose survival, later becoming an advisor to Philip and pushing him toward conflict with Rome. But for the Illyrians, his betrayal left them exposed. Rome once again imposed its will, reducing Illyrian independence even further. The Adriatic, which had once been the beating heart of Illyrian power, was now firmly under Roman dominance. The Second Illyrian War was short, but it carried deep consequences. It cemented Rome's position as the arbiter of the Eastern Adriatic, reassured its allies in Greece, and sent a message to all who defied them. Resistance would not be tolerated. Still, the Illyrians were not yet finished. A generation later, under a new king, they would rise once more, and this time their struggle would intertwine with Rome's wars against Macedon itself. Nearly half a century after Queen Teuta's defiance, the Illyrians made one last bid for freedom. This time, their leader was King Gentius, the last significant ruler of the Adriatic kingdom. From his capital at Skodra, Gentius worked to revive Illyrian strength, rallying tribes and building a fleet. For years, he managed to maintain a fragile independence, watching as Rome became ever more entangled in the politics of Greece and Macedonia. But when the Great War between Rome and Perseus of Macedon erupted in 171 BC, Gentius saw his chance. he allied himself with Perseus, hoping to challenge Roman dominance and restore Illyrian power. For a brief moment, it seemed as though the Illyrians might once again rise to their former glory. Illyrian ships harassed Roman allies, and their warriors prepared for open conflict. Rome, however, was no longer the inexperienced power it had been during Teuta's reign. Its legions had grown stronger, its fleets unmatched. In 168 BC, the consul Lucius Anicius Gallus led a massive campaign into Illyria. The result was devastatingly one-sided. Within just 30 days, the Romans swept through the kingdom, capturing towns, seizing ships, and scattering resistance. Gentius himself was surrounded and forced to surrender at Scodra. His fate symbolized the end of an era. Taken in chains to Rome, Gentius and his family were paraded in triumph through the streets before being thrown into prison. The Illyrian kingdom was dissolved, its territory broken apart and placed under Roman administration. From then on, Illyrian tribes existed only under the shadow of Roman authority. Their proud tradition of independence and piracy, which had once dominated the Adriatic, was gone forever. The Illyrian Wars, spanning from 229 to 168 BC, were far more than a series of minor conflicts. They marked the beginning of Rome's expansion into the Balkans, a crucial step in its transformation into a Mediterranean superpower. What started as an effort to protect trade routes spiraled into decades of conquest and diplomacy that drew Rome deeper into Greek affairs and set the stage for the eventual conquest of Macedonia, Greece, and beyond. The Illyrians resisted fiercely, led by figures like Queen Teuta, Demetrius of Pharos, and King Gentius. But in the end, their story was the same as so many others in Rome's path. They fought bravely, but they stood against a rising empire whose ambitions knew no bounds. With the fall of Illyria, the Balkans had become part of Rome's world, and the Adriatic was now, unmistakably, a Roman sea. If you'd like to see each of these wars told in even greater detail, with full episodes on Queen Teuta, Demetrius of Pharos, and King Gentius, make sure to like this video and let me know in the comments.